good dreams must eventually come to an end, and so is this one. The Sandman, the Dreamweaver, the tale of the shaper of all stories that ever were and ever will be. Morpheus sealed his fate when he took his son's life, but in the end, he went out on his own terms, and that's as good a death as anyone can ask for. Netflix reached the same destination Gaiman took us to nearly 3 decades ago. Nevertheless, you guys must have guessed that this video is about discussing the changes made by them to this classic piece of comic art. So, without further ado, these are the top 10 biggest differences between the Sandman comics and Season 2 Part 2 Explained. Before we get into things, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Dream, you alright?
Yes.
The mortal hesitations of an endless. For much of the first half of Season 2 Part 2, Dream was insistent on involving himself with the process of preventing his own death. This is a major departure from the comics because there, he was always aware of the fact that as long as he stayed within the dreaming, no harm would come to him. Indeed, he doesn't leave the dreaming until a critical moment comes to pass. But in the show, things are very different. Episode 7 of the second season of Netflix's Sandman focuses on an immortal god's rather mortal concerns. Because while Dream's assertion that he doesn't want to prevent his death for his own sake is true, it's also false in so many ways. At the beginning of the episode, he goes to meet Destiny to see if he can figure out how to prevent his own end by peeking into his book. That doesn't work because, as Destiny tells him, his actions will determine the future course, not the words recorded in his eldest sibling's book. Dream then visits the kindly ones with quote-unquote gifts, which they immediately recognize as bribes and rebuff him by saying his death was inevitable. Morpheus then takes a hint from Lucien and visits his parents, Father Time and Mother Night, to see if cosmic law could be bent towards leniency for once, for he has responsibilities and he doesn't wish to see his denizens come to any harm. But when they give him selfish means to achieve his ends, Dream rejects them as any true king would and thanks them for the gift of his existence. In the end, the Dream Lord decides that what he really needs to do is get Daniel into the dreaming because it's one of his most pressing duties to prepare his next aspect for ascension. And the fact that he goes to the waking world to personally attend to the matter is a huge deviation from the books, because there, Morpheus does no such thing. Perhaps the biggest giveaway that he is experiencing mortal feelings for the very first time in their true essence is his reaction to Delirium's claim that there are many destinies prowling his elder brother's garden. This, to Dream, indicates that his own destiny is unfixed and it gives him hope, something that makes him smile earnestly for the first time in his very long life. And while all of the things we've just mentioned are completely off the mark when it comes to Netflix's Sandman being an authentic adaptation, the way in which they humanize Dream cannot be understated. This is why we find these mortal hesitations of an endless to be endlessly fascinating, for it's the first time where Dream truly understands what his subjects in the waking world go through when they're not dreaming. And this also leads him to a place he doesn't usually go unless he's being summoned.
I'm sorry. You're here.
Dream's visit to despair. A huge theme of Morpheus' character arc in Part 2 is his deep regret over taking the life of his own son. When Orpheus was alive, Dream ignored him and deterred him in every manner possible. It was only in his final days that he truly realized his love for his son, and this gave birth to despair so strong that he entered his sister's realm without having been summoned. When despair sees Dream, she speaks to him kindly, as destruction would speak to her. For despite being the aspect that fuels one of the worst feelings a human can ever feel, despair is a stepping stone towards the path of healing. She tells Morpheus that everyone needs a place to go when they despair over their lives and their own actions, and while it might seem meaningless, that itself is what gives meaning to the next act of their lives. This is sage advice coming from a person who, a season ago, was bent upon making Morpheus spill family blood. But we all know that despair was just doing her twin's bidding. That too was born from a love only a sibling could understand. For, in the end, the Endless are siblings above all else, and Morpheus' visit to Despair's realm gives him the hint that he'd been waiting for to put his own affairs in order. When he utters the name Daniel Hall, the babe chosen to become his next aspect, Despair checks her mirrors and finds Daniel's mother, Laida, within them. She shows her brother the machinations of Loki and Puck, and Dream witnesses firsthand the way in which he's being framed for a crime he did not commit. This gives him the strength to go ahead and create an investigative task force that includes two of the unlikeliest members of all time, but it also serves to further humanize him, for it is his despair that creates his desire order to protect his successor. Dream's despair also leads him to fall back on certain aspects of his previous personality, but when he sees Alex Burgess in Rose Walker's new mansion, he's reminded of his own pain. But after a good scolding from Johanna Constantine, he endeavors to become better and frees Alex from the eternal sleep. All of this would not have been possible had he not ended up in his sister's realm, and though he never says it, we're sure he was grateful for despair in the end. But now that we brought up Loki and Puck,
we don't make the mistakes most couples do. We know we can't trust one another.
Loki and Puck's relationship issues. The relationship between these two tricksters is a masterclass in understanding how tempestuous personalities attract one another and why they're fated to never remain together. That's because Loki and Puck's relationship is completely missing from the comics, where they are relatively minor characters who only fulfill the role that their author appropriated them for. In the comics, Loki and Puck do not have disagreements over how to handle the situation they find themselves in following Morpheus' visit to them within the halls of the Vatican. We thought it was a nice touch that they were the ones behind allowing the papacy to accept female priests, because it represents a change that doesn't come from non-chaotic thinking. In the comics, there's only one scene that somewhat corresponds with the events of the show when it comes to Loki and Puck, and that's the scene where the former kills one of Laida Hall's associates to assert the fact that he will not be lorded over by anyone. And in the show, we see Loki and Puck go through the entire arc of a relationship where they fall in love, help each other, despise each other, and then ultimately break things off. The show portrays Loki as being the more evil-minded of the two. Puck, meanwhile, is the one who gives him the idea of kidnapping Daniel before Dream asks for it, and they're disobeying the pact Loki made with Dream to spare himself eternal torture. But in the comics, it all happens at Dream's request. Also, while Puck looks menacing when he kidnaps Daniel, he's a lot gentler with the boy after the fact because he's not vindictive by nature. Well, that's not entirely accurate, because the truth is he's only vindictive towards those who have wronged him. Daniel, being an innocent child, has done him no harm, and so when he realizes that Loki intends on using the kid as a pawn in his own games, Puck tries to flee with Daniel. He cares for Daniel, but Loki doesn't even care for his own children, and this makes Puck think that he'll kill the boy just to get back at Dream. In the end, that's proven to not be the case, because Loki only means to make Daniel discard his mortal aspects and become truly endless. But by that time, he's already done things he can never take back. He drugged Puck to ensure that he wouldn't interfere, where in the comics, they put Daniel into the flames together. When Puck comes to, he immediately leaves because despite being a trickster, he doesn't appreciate being tricked by the man who's supposed to be his partner. The Sandman does an amazing job of humanizing characters that are inherently inhuman, and the relationship between Puck and Loki is a prime example of that. Heck, Robin Goodfellow even assists in the recovery of Daniel, which is actually a decent act for one who has such a tainted reputation. And that just goes to show that the path towards redemption is paved one good deed at a time. Jack Gleason did a phenomenal job portraying his character's complexity, or what are humans if not complex creatures striving to portray themselves in simplistic packages. Lux. One of the biggest missing elements from the series is Lucifer Morningstar, whose involvement went far beyond that little tiff he had with Dream. In the comic book universe, the character of Lucifer, as we know him, was spawned from Gaiman's work. His desire to escape his duties and become part of Lux was created in the pages of the Sandman and not as a separate entity, which is why he remains part of the series even as it comes to an end. Lux is a crucial part of the final 2 arcs of the Sandman franchise because it's where everything begins. Unlike the show, where Laida Hall is drawn away from Daniel by Rose Walker's desire to have dinner in London, in the comics, she leaves him because she has a job interview. If you guys haven't guessed it already, that interview is at Lux, and we think it's rather fitting that Laida's fall from grace begins at the Devil's new home. Hetty doesn't play as big a role in swaying Laida towards accepting her grandmother's offer of vengeance as she does in the show, because in the comics, Laida pretty much arrives at that conclusion all by herself. She'd noticed sand in Daniel's crib the day he disappeared, and it wasn't Puck and Loki's meddling that pointed her towards Dream. Apart from being the location where Laida's return to her Fury aspect begins, Lux also has an important role in the subplot of Delirium's missing dog. In the comics, she doesn't get Goldie as her search companion, but another one of Dream's gargoyles, and Barnabas isn't with Hetty, she just finds him randomly, which is fitting for a character as random as Delirium. But the reason we bring up Lux is that when Delirium arrives at Lucifer's new home, she asks him for his help and he refuses her with the gentlest of apologies. He recounts how, before vacating Hell, he'd wanted to destroy Morpheus. We say he because in the comics, Lucifer was a man, just like Tom Ellis. Heck, he'd even received a visit from the angel Remiel, who was now in charge of his former domain. Lucifer thinks that he might have lost his battles with Dream, but now that he was so close to winning the war, he didn't want to. He truly felt sorry about the fact that Dream had to die, and he gently tells Delirium to continue looking for Barnabas instead of trying to help her brother, because he knows there's no help that will reach Dream in time. This humanizing moment, where the devil expresses empathy at the loss of an adversary, was touching, and we're sad that complex licensing and rights issues prevented it from being a part of Netflix's Sandman. Also, we'd have loved seeing Lucifer put Remiel in his place for being a bumbling coward, but as they say, we can't get everything that we want, right? Laida Hall's psychotic breakdown. Having said what we ended the last entry with, we'd have absolutely loved to witness this psychotic breakdown of Laida Hall because it's the one thing that the comics did so well we're outraged it wasn't in the show. After realizing that Daniel had been taken from her, Laida just starts wandering through the streets and becomes the figure of walking despair and vengeance. She tells herself that she's been strong for Daniel, and she tries to go about her day as normally as she can, and she even fights off a Lux employee who tries to make a pass at her, thinking that her grief would open her up to such a thing, but in the end she can't escape her despair. Laida roams the streets, half conscious, half dreaming, and it's the other half that is endlessly fascinating for us. Because when Laida is out of it, she ends up meeting two sisters who embody the concept of vengeance as much as the Furies do. Laida meets the Gorgons, the sisters of Medusa, who offer her a drink that can give her the powers of Medusa herself. She eats one of the golden apples of the Hesperides, but instead of gaining immortality, her despair is intensified, for the apple's guardian, Ladon, poisons her mind. The moment where Laida snaps back to reality and finds herself in a different location each time is truly haunting, because it depicts a psychotic breakdown with extreme accuracy. Walter White might have lied about his fugue state, but comic book Laida Hall actually goes through one, and it breaks her so completely that she ends up meeting the Furies of her own accord. None of this was in the show, where Hedy led her to the power that made her Fury, and while the comics had such a ritual as well, the show didn't do nearly enough justice to the mental breakdown that came before it.
I didn't come here for you.
No, I know that.
The Corinthian and Johanna Constantine. One of the best things about Season 2 Part 2 was the redemption of the Corinthian, because it turned into a 2-for-1 special. That's because unlike the comics, where Dream remains in the dreaming and sends Corinthian and Matthew to search for Daniel, in the show, he first enlists Johanna Constantine for the job. After giving her the hard sell, Dream takes a note from her and remains within the dreaming and recreates the Corinthian to assist her in the task. But as it turns out, he's bringing together two souls that are meant for each other, because neither Johanna nor the Corinthian can get rid of their murderous aspects. Johanna is reintroduced while having a sex dream where she ends up killing her lover, and killing the people he slept with was a core personality trait of the first Corinthian. But the second Corinthian is such a gentle, kind, attentive, and obedient creature that you can't help but feel like he's a completely different person. His pursuit of Johanna while they're working on finding and securing Daniel is so earnest that we can almost forget all the heinous deeds his first version committed in the first season of Netflix's Sandman. And when they finally get together after Dream's funeral, it feels like something that's been coming for centuries, or millennia even. A nightmare and a bloodthirsty sorceress is a couple made in heaven. Who'd have thunk it? But that's a reality that's achieved in Season 2 Part 2, and we're glad for it. Neither Johanna nor the Corinthian could ever be fully redeemed if they were left to their own devices, but together they might just have a chance, and a romance in their dreams might just be better than anything they've experienced in their waking lives.
Tell the Dream King that despite his freeing Loki, there is no grudge between us.
Odin's visit and Loki's eyes. This one's a minor change because Odin's appearance in the show is basically attributed to a summoning gone wrong, but nevertheless it's important because it involves the Corinthian and him doing something that's as badass as it is terrifying. In the comics, Odin visits Dream personally to tell him that he's figured out his trick. He knows the Loki in his possession is a Dream fragment, and he demands that Dream return his true prisoner to him. Dream says that he can't do that and actually apologizes for his deception, which makes the All-Father admit that his true enmity doesn't lie with Dream. The two part on amicable terms, and Odin finds Loki in one of his own 9 realms. In the comics, Loki and Puck took Daniel to Svartalheim, where they put him in the sacred flames that the dwarves used to create divine weapons. It's there that Matthew and the Corinthian come across Daniel, and while Puck stays out of the battle that ensues, he's not responsible for what happens next. Loki might be the god of fire and wit, but as it turns out, even he is helpless in the face of a nightmare, because unlike the TV show, where the Corinthian devours the eyes of Mrs. Shore to locate his target, in the comics, he eats the eyes of the god of mischief himself. This gives him a taste of what the world looks like from the perspective of a god, and Odin arrives with Thor in tow shortly after. He takes his blood brother back to his prison below the world, where Loki is once again bound with the entrails of his own son and made to suffer once again, but his wife, Sigyn, is happy to see him return. There's no mention of her in the show, which is a disservice to Norse mythology because her story is deeply intertwined with Loki's, and unlike the show, where a hint of the former Corinthian returns when he sees Rose Walker, in the comics, it happens when he eats Loki's eyes. And if eating the god of mischief's eyes isn't badass for a nightmare, we don't know what is. In that regard, the show was a massive tease, because they hinted the Corinthian will do the same, but never actually followed through on it, and that's something we'll regret forever now that there won't be another adaptation of the Sandman. Nuala's boon and bane. Another change that feels minor but is major is the manner in which Nuala's boon becomes Dream's bane. In the show, Nuala's return to Fairy is at the command of Titania, not motivated by Cluracan's individual desire as it was in the comics. After spending some time in her homeland and realizing that it will never change, Nuala notices that her necklace, which was a gift from Dream, is missing. Turns out, Titania swapped it, and when the two women understand that Dream is in mortal danger, Nuala tells her queen to not use the boon of the necklace, but Titania does it anyway because she's jealous of her former aide. She can see clear as day that Nuala loves Dream and doesn't want her to be the one to call him in his hour of need. But in the comics, she states her jealousy plainly and doesn't do the dishonorable thing by stealing Nuala's necklace. Instead, Nuala herself calls the Dream Lord to Fairy once she discovers the fact that he will die soon, and when he arrives, he tells her that she has done him a great disservice. Nuala wants Dream to remain in Fairy, for it might destroy the dreaming but keep him alive, and unlike the show, where the boon she asks is for his immediate return to the dreaming, in the comics, she requests that Dream love her the way she loves him. It's a selfish desire, and one that we can't imagine the show Nuala expressing given her disposition, but that's what makes it so important. Nuala's love for Dream is so strong she's willing to risk it all just to have it reciprocated, and when he rejects her, she understands. Morpheus tells her he can't love her the way she wants him to, but he can give her his love in her dreams. Nuala tells him she already has that, and the two part ways for good. This longing of hers is depicted wordlessly by Netflix, which is both good and bad in its own ways, just how love is both good and bad in its own ways. And for that, we'll settle for not having received an adaptation of Cluracan's many misadventures, which saw him invoke the Dream Lord's assistance in the comics. Desire's tears. This is an extremely minor detail when you consider everything else we've mentioned, but that doesn't change the fact that the one who instigated the Endless War is the one who ended up regretting it the most. Desire, who had been trying to get Dream to spill family blood for eons beyond count, precisely so he would die at the hands of the kindly ones, found themselves weeping even before they attended his wake. That's because Desire realized that in the end, all they truly wanted was their brother's attention and acceptance, not their ultimate demise. The speech Desire gives at Morpheus' funeral is pretty much taken word for word from the comics, but the emotion that's delivered with it is completely created by the show. That single glittery tear upon their cheek and Mason Alexander Park's phenomenal portrayal of regret and sorrow will live on in our minds eternally. Or, as we mentioned in our Endless War video, it's only when one achieves the object of their desire that they fully experience the despair that comes along with it, and that fleeting torrent of emotion is captured perfectly by Mason. The Wake. This final point is going to be extremely short because there were a few members missing from Dream's funeral and a few certain events that didn't transpire the way they did in the comics. For instance, Bast is completely missing from the show, whereas in the books, she delivers a eulogy for the one man who made her happy. The angels, Remiel and Duma, attend his wake, and while the latter doesn't speak, the single tear he sheds in the light of Dream's death speaks 1,000 words. The conversation Death and Hob Gadling have with regards to his continued existence takes place in the real world, and Dream's tools, which become a part of his funerary boat, were handed over to Matthew in the comics so that Daniel may one day make good use of them. All of these changes are small and might seem insignificant, but for readers of the comics, they hold deep meaning. And what are we, if not fans of the Sandman, who have covered his tale in such excruciating detail? Marvelous verdict. A Unfortunately, that's it for this one, Dreamers. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys real soon with more marvelous content just as fascinating as the Sandman series is. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, until next time, stay safe, and as Lord Morpheus